Hi, it's time for another verb of the day. Today's verb is utter. Let's take a look at some of the definitions or ways that we use this verb. The first way you're likely to hear utter used is to mean to make a sound with one's voice. With this particular definition, I think of it actually being used in the negative. So perhaps it's in the past tense. Someone didn't utter a sound or didn't utter a noise, right? So not just words, right? But anything could be a, a cough, right? No noise, nothing being produced. A second way you'll hear the verb utter used is to mean to express in words. So the second definition can be used like speak, right? So noting someone who's talking, that could be another way to think about using this verb. You should know that utter is a regular verb. To make the progressive tense, all you need to do is add ing to form uttering. The past tense and participle forms of this verb are made by adding ed. Our base verb, utter, ends in a voiced R sound. So our past tense ending is going to make a D sound. Uttered, uttered. Okay. Now, we don't really have any phrasal verbs that connect to this particular verb, so that's going to allow us to focus on practicing our verb of the day in a couple different verb tenses. Today, we're going to practice the simple past tense and the simple future using will. Let's start with the simple past tense. We use this verb tense to describe an action that occurred at some known point in the past. And the nice thing about this particular verb is that our structure is going to be the same no matter what our subject is. So in the affirmative, we're going to use that ed form of our verb. Let's take a look at an example sentence. The man allegedly uttered a slur at the victim before attacking her. So, this is another way to say the man said, the man used, and maybe slur could be a new word for some. This is a word that has an extremely negative meaning to it. It's usually directed at people, perhaps because of their race, their ethnicity, their religion, but it is extremely negative, extremely hurtful. Many times I think of these as words I'm not going to say ever. I'm not going to use them. So I'm not going to give you examples because I don't use those particular words as I speak or communicate. Now let's take a look at how we make a negative simple past tense sentence. To do this, we're going to use did not and then the base verb. Sometimes you might hear the contraction didn't and then the base verb. Either one is fine, they mean the same thing. Another example sentence might be, she did not utter an apology. Right? So this is connecting back to that second definition around kind of someone speaking, saying words. Finally, let's look at making a yes or no question in the simple past tense. To do this, we're going to start with did, then we're going to have our subject, then the base verb. So notice in the negative and our yes or no question, I'm not using the ed form of the verb. Here's another example. Did they utter a single word during the movie? So perhaps someone is telling me about another person or group of people that were just engrossed. They were so interested and focused. They weren't bored or trying to talk to their neighbors or perhaps be critical. So we're just kind of asking that follow-up question. Did they utter a single word? Did they say anything during the movie? Now let's take a look at the simple future. Today we're going to focus on using will. This is really common with predictions and promises. And the nice thing about using will to talk about future events is that our structure is going to be the same no matter what our subject is. So we're going to use will, and then we're going to use the base verb. Here's an example sentence. Male songbirds will utter cheerful notes at sunrise. So with this definition, we're talking about sounds, not words, right? Because we're talking about animals. And essentially, these birds are going to make cheerful noises at sunrise. If you want to make a negative simple future sentence using will, our structure is going to be will, not, and then the base verb. You might hear the contraction form for will not. That's won't. WON apostrophe T. An example of the simple future negative here with our verb utter would be the performance artist will not utter a single word for 365 days starting on his birthday. This particular sentence I borrowed from a news article reporting on something this particular person is going to do. So, a performance artist, someone who thinks of creative things to do. I won't get into what else he's doing, but part of the performance is that he isn't going to speak for an entire year. Lastly, let's look at making a yes or no question in the simple future using will. Our structure here is going to be to start with will, then we'll have our subject, then the base verb. You can see that in the example. Will he utter his first word while we are gone? This is a sentence I've heard some new parents say when they think their child is very close to speaking. They want to make sure they're there when that child says his or her first words. Now, let's take a moment to look at some words and a phrase related to our verb utter. The first word we're going to look at is just the adjective form of this word. So we have the exact same spelling, the exact same pronunciation, but when we use utter as an adjective, we mean complete or absolute. Let's take a look at an example of this. Your room is an utter mess. Right? This might be something parents have, maybe you've said this to your children, or when you were a child, you heard your parents say something like this, but your room is a complete mess. Your room is an absolute mess. So you might think kind of total. The whole room is messy. Another word you might hear is the noun utterance, right? So we use this noun to refer to spoken word, a statement, or even sounds that someone makes from their voice. An example here. He responded with some strange utterance. Right? So we don't have a lot of context, right? But this implies somebody made some sounds. Maybe they were words, but they were different to us. Maybe we weren't able to understand them. And perhaps that's why we're describing it in this way as an utterance. Did they say words? Did they make noises? I'm not completely sure. The last thing we're going to look at today is the phrase to not utter a word. Now, I talked a little bit about this as we looked at that first definition, but many times as people are using this phrase, they are encouraging someone to be completely silent, or they're asking them to keep something a secret. So an example of this might be, do not utter a word about this to your father. When I was pretty young, I heard this from my mother. She, as she was backing out of the car, she kind of tapped, right, a fence, right. So she just came into contact, wasn't super serious, but she didn't want my dad to know there was a little scratch on the back of the car. So it was, do not utter a word about this to your father. And in case my parents ever watch this, my father has also asked me to not utter a single word to my mother about something. So those little secrets we might keep from our partners. So that definition there, again, or my example sentence is connecting back to a secret. But if you really wanted someone to be quiet, right, we could use that imperative. Do not utter a word. don't say anything or don't utter a sound, right? So I hope this video has helped us understand how to use the verb utter. This was another great suggestion from the viewer, Robert. So thank you so much. Please continue to suggest other verbs you'd like to see in the future. I really appreciate you watching, and I hope you have a great day.